Literally everything is a "that's what she said" joke with me right now. You know why? You know why.
Why is that?
The audience does not know why. You know why. I'm going to talk about it.
Okay, talk about it.
But after I complete the regimen, I'm in the middle of a process of experimenting with retraining my nervous system to let go of attachment to outcomes. Mm-hmm. Am I ringing any bells?
Yes, you are, but I think you should explain, because retraining your nervous system is kind of a big deal.
Not gonna yet,
Oh.
Abby. I'm in the middle. I want to be able to report my findings.
You know this is going to be huge when huge.
It's going to be
say
huge.
It that way?
You said it's going to be huge.
Huge.
Huge. There are people who take the "huh" off of the fronts of words, and it's to sound smart, like human.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it is going to be huge, literally.
All right, that's what she said. Okay.
Abby's on board. You are now. We have arrived. We're here.
Yes.
All right. Well, without further ado, welcome to the True North podcast, where two practicing light workers get together for an hour every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind, so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby, coming to you from colorful Colorado.
What are you doing in Colorado?
I'm actually road tripping it right now, Ryan. So this is going to be an interesting episode 27. What am I doing in Colorado? Well, my beautiful sister and her family live here, and they were taking a camping trip way up in the mountains and said, "Hey, you want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm down for the mountains." So, you know.
But you hate camping in mountains.
Oh, really?
I think if you could burrow,
it.
like make a cave in a mountainside
Yep.
and just live there, you would.
I would.
And just never leave.
I would become a shaman. I would never leave. You know, I decided that. We climbed a big peak this morning. My niece, this was her first, big trek. I'm a 14er kind of girl. For those of you that don't know, I like to climb mountains above 14,000 feet. And I need to get her warmed up so she can go with me one day. So we did a 10,800 something odd feet mountain this morning. It was her first big one. And we were up there, we were hiking, and seriously just soaking in the aspens and the fir trees and the pines and the smell of dirt, the smell of the mountain. And I thought, I'm not coming back down. There's a little fire station at the top of this mountain, and I'm just gonna hole up in here for a while. I'll see y'all later. So yes,
what is it
I
like
would.
coming back to the city after having those experiences? I'm eating a snack right now, so I'm talking with my mouth.
Hey, I'm in the car. You're eating a snack. This is going to be the best episode ever. What is it like?
Well, there's no video for the YouTube people. It's just audio today.
Yes, just audio today. What is it like to relaunch? It's incredibly difficult. And every time I come and get a taste, it's harder and harder to come home and be satisfied. It truly is a lesson in attachment.
Well, how do you find satisfaction with life that's not in the mountains then? What do you do to not just sit here and sulk about the fact that you're not out there all the time?
Right. So I do a lot of grounding when I'm here, and I'm very intentional about being present. And I've been reading something from this shaman named Lynn Andrews called Love and Power, and it kind of is applicable timing, but she talks a lot about and the ocean can do this too, but I am a mountain girl. I knew it from when I was little, and my aunt and uncle would take me hiking all the time. I'm just a mountain girl. And there is power in the mountains. And there used to be these great teachers, Jesus, Buddha, who could replenish their power on their own. They had that capability to give their power, but then also refill their power. And that's incredibly difficult for us kind of lay people to do. And so what she is saying, Lynn Andrews, in this book, is that the mountains hold that power. And so you need to kind of take these regular treks to the mountains and either leave power for when you need it again, or take power And so today, like this trip, I really came because I am depleted. And so I spent a lot of time grounding, making sure that I was kind of pulling back in some of that power that I needed, being present. I did my meditation that Kathleen taught us to do. Yeah, we had a tribe retreat with Kathleen Tucci last weekend, everybody. It was fantastic. And so I met my guide up here and we just kind of had a nice long conversation. So doing those things, when I do have to kind of relaunch back into the city, back into Texas, like I'm able to carry that with me in spirit. Like I can come back to this place, and it's odd because it's exactly in my meditation, the smells that I smelled on this trip, the things that I've seen, the places that we went, that is exactly what I see in my meditation. And so...
So did you see that in your meditation before you saw it in real life? Or
yes.
Was it the other way around? Oh, man.
Yes.
Tell me about that. How did you find in reality the thing that you saw in your meditation?
How did I find the thing in reality?
Well, you said like you saw this place in your meditation before you actually
yes,
there,
and I still
right?
haven't found the exact place.
Just kind of like the general setting of mountain.
I'm close. Like I think I'm on this search for it, and I don't know if I'll ever find it. I would love to, but it's this dense forest, this circle of boulders that have been weathered and they're like rounded, and that's where I sit. And I kind of sit up a little bit, and then my guides come walking out of the trees, like when one of them wants to share something with me. And so when I literally go on these hikes and I'm walking into this forest to get to this huge peak, and I smell, like that's the smell I have of that, just, decaying trees and dirt and mulch and all the smells the trees give off. I feel like that's why I love hiking so much, is I feel like I immediately go, it's like that muscle memory. I go to that meditative place. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Side note. Do you know what a tree looks like when it's been hit by lightning?
Yes, I do.
If you come across a tree that's been hit by lightning, how much longer are you there?
You need one of those.
I need one of those.
We're
I
heading
need
back to the city. However,
now?
I think I know, yes. But we've got a ways to go, and we're stopping here in a bit. I'm almost positive I can get you one.
That would be amazing. Okay, continue. I need it for a thing. I'll tell everybody about it after I figure out the thing I need it for.
Yeah. So what I do when I relaunch, to kind of keep myself out of, that whiny woe is me, I'm not in the mountains kind of thing, is number one, I am very intentional about getting back to it as often as I can. And I make it happen. Now that's easy for me because I get to kind of knock out two birds with one stone. My sister lives in the mountains, but
yes.
Then I always at least have something to look forward to. Like I know I'm going to be going soon if I can kind of plan a trip down the road to get me back here. And then I try to recreate spaces in my backyard, in our neighborhood. Like there are a ton of trees where I live in Dallas, and so just trying to spend as much time out there that it, of course, doesn't exactly replicate because it is the middle of the city, but just trying to be outside as much as possible, and then meditate. Literally, when I meditate, I go back to this place. It's home.
And that's what kind of helps you not feel so cranky about not being there physically. You bring it home to you.
Yes, but then I also remember that I have a choice. Like, I'm choosing to stay in Dallas. I am choosing that. And so anytime I sort of get that pang of like, oh, why can't I live here? And sort of annoy myself. It's like I have to remember, I have two Texans. I'm married to a Texan and I gave birth to a Texan. And so, my son loves the mountains. Like he has had a blast this week. Like he's dirty. He's been building things with sticks and rocks. We've been hiking and biking and kayaking out on the river, and he loves it, but he is also very much a city boy too, and so I just kind of have to find that balance. But remembering that I have a choice is also very key. I can pick up and move here anytime. Now, is that the best thing for my family? Not probably today, but it might be one day, and so that also keeps me kind of grounded.
What happens if you don't?
if I don't ground, or if I don't kind of find
Like if
that,
you,
remember that.
if you don't like, if you're not intentional about, well, first of all, I don't want to glaze over the fact that you reminded yourself that it's a choice. Like that's we could do a whole episode on that. In fact, I'm going to take notes and say we should do a whole episode on that.
Perfect.
Like your situation is your choice, and because ultimately you can like if it really meant a lot to you, you could figure out a way to live out there, or at least get to a place where you can buy a house out there and like live in both places or something like that. And so when you don't, it is your choice that you're not. And I think that's a good thing to remind yourself of. Like if you're ever in a situation you don't want to be in, or you question, or you wish it was something else, well, it's within your power. And if it's not, figure out why and get to a point where it is. And that's usually not that hard to do if you just actually put your mind to it.
Well, and here's the thing about this too is I have learned this big lesson in the last 10 years that we are exactly where we are for a purpose. There is a reason. So if I am still in Dallas and I am still in the city, I am meant to learn something there. If I'm not capable of making the choice to pick up and move somewhere to the mountains, there is a reason that I am still there. And if I try to rush that and I sit in all this future, like, I can't wait until I can move, then I am completely missing what I am supposed to be learning in that moment. And like, I have this idea that, like I have this book that I want to write. I have this whole healing modality. We have our stuff. And it's like, I think what's supposed to happen is all of that's supposed to grow and all of that is supposed to build. And then I find my retreat in the mountains, because at that point it's going to be something where I can do it remotely. I can do it, I'm going to be traveling whatever the case may be, or we're holding these huge retreats here in the mountains because of the spiritual power that they hold, right? So if I'm just like wishing away my time, then I am basically not growing. I'm not allowing myself to grow in the way that I need to.
Because you're not being here and now. Like you're in the classroom, but you're looking out the window.
Right. Yes. And I think it's so
important. That's actually
to
really good.
Be in the here and now and figure out why you're there. Now, there's things you can do to make you happier. Like you said, yes, my sister just bought some land. They're building a cabin. I'm like, that works for me. I can come anytime. So there's things that you can do, yes. But I also don't want to overlook the fact that I have something to learn, clearly, because otherwise I'd be here by now.
I am so glad you said that. I've got people in my life who are in situations that they would prefer not to be in and are ready to go to like the next thing. And then it becomes, well, then why am I still here? Like kind of like you said, like there are things that still tie you to the situation that you're in that you spend a lot of time wishing you weren't in, right? And almost every single time we investigate those together and get curious about why it's so hard to just up and move to a life situation that you'd prefer, the answer is always that same thing. I'm here, I'm right where I need to be right now because there's a lesson I need to learn. And it's almost a thing where if I'm going to get to that next chapter, that's predicated on me learning the thing I need to learn in this one, or else that is going to not be what it was supposed to be.
Exactly. Yes.
Or you may learn what you need to learn in this chapter and realize that the chapter you thought was the next one actually isn't where you're headed. And if you had gone there, you would have found yourself way off course.
Right. So that's a good question, though. When do you know it's time?
Well, when you've learned the lessons.
How do you know that you've learned the lessons?
Or if other people... Well, in school, there's a test, right?
Yes.
Like, there's something that's a very concrete thing that's like, have you learned this or not? Do you need to be held back, or can you go to the next grade? And I mean, I don't know. I feel like, oh shit, man, I don't know. Like, it's really hard to even have that conversation without specifics.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, I also think it's one of those things where anytime I have grown as a human, I don't notice the moment where all of a sudden I just magically transition from not having grown to having grown. But I will catch myself in a behavior or a thought pattern or a response that indicates that I have done the growing. It's almost like it happens in the background while you're not paying attention, and all of a sudden you step outside yourself and watch yourself do a thing, and you're like, whoa, a year ago I would have responded to this very, very differently.
Yes.
And then you can trace back, why am I so chill about this? Or why is this not bothering me? Or whatever the thing is that you notice is different about yourself. And then all of a sudden, boom, you realize that somewhere in the past year, that growth took place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not hard to do. You just have to pay attention to how you show up.
Right, and we think it's difficult, but it goes back to that links in the chain conversation that we've had in the past, where all you literally have to do is just take one step. Because then, yes. You are going to look back in a year and think, wow, I have gone incredibly far without feeling like you've done a whole lot of work.
Right. I mean, go ahead.
Well, I also think, I do also think there is something like when it is time for you, if you are very aware and you are very present and you have kind of tapped into your universal guidance, I do think that they deliver signs and they open up opportunities to kind of show you like, hey, okay, like for example, if it were my time to move to Colorado, then I think there would just be some interesting opportunities that happen to, like, okay, here's a perfect example. I used to teach outdoor education at Camp Grady Spruce out in Possum Kingdom Lake in Texas. And I spent quite a bit of time there, grew a lot, learned a ton of lessons. That's where I realized I was a lesbian. So like
at Grady Spruce, no way.
Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that came out of that. And so there was a part of me that was very comfortable just staying there, right? Because I discovered this huge part of myself. So it's knowing,
right. It
was home, it was comfortable, but in a way, like if you looked at it from paper, I had outgrown my job. And I would have, like looking back on it now, I would have just stifled myself had I stayed there for that reason. So what happened is I sort of just put out the feelers, like, okay, I'm thinking about leaving, thinking about moving on. And I did, and I didn't really have anything lined up and didn't know what I was going to do. And moved into the city with my best friend. We'd rented an apartment. I was going to try to go back to teaching. And I got a phone call from the executive director at the Richardson YMCA. Out of the blue. Never met this man. Didn't know him. Even though I was a part of the Y system. No idea who it was. My executive director out at Camp Grady Spruce had called him and said, you are going to hire this person as your new program director. And he's like, I don't know this person. And he goes, but I trust you. So, okay. Well, I came in for an interview. I think your brother actually happened to be on the panel, if I remember correctly, because they brought in a bunch of, all of long-term people that had worked there. It was you, not you, Evangeline, I think it was Brandon, a couple other people, with some of the directors for my interview.
Wow, I don't think I ever realized that they worked there before you did.
Yeah, they worked there with the former director, Nikki. Anyway, not important.
Right.
But,
named.
Yeah, right. So it completely changed the course and direction. And had I not like put the feelers out, or had I not just been open to opportunities, I probably wouldn't have called this guy back. I might not have even answered the phone. There was a lot of things that sort of just fell into place. And so I think when you're talking about those tests, like to know whether you've passed or failed, I think things like that begin to happen where I did not ask my executive director to make that phone call. I was not even looking within the Y for a job. She just knew, okay, we're losing an asset. We want to keep her within the system. She needs to grow. Let's, here's a growth opportunity. And so, and then voila, here we are. So, but I think you'll have to be receptive to that. But those kinds of things are what can really open for you when you've learned your lesson and it's time to move on.
And I think a big part of that comes down to just paying attention and keeping your ear to the ground for those types of things, but in some type of a framework that you are participating in. Like, it's one thing to just say, I want a sign from the universe, and then just look at everything. Could this be the sign? Like, that's... I mean, and I also know some people who get tempted to go down that rabbit hole, and then they don't even make decisions for themselves. They're like, every single thing that they do, it's like, well, then the universe is going to tell me when to do it. I'm just, and so there's a certain level of, like, participating in the co-creation of your own life and your own future, but understanding that it is co-creation, and there are forces that are directly and intensely invested in seeing you go on the path that you came here to go on. And they're going to open doors, but you have to, like, be looking for the doors, recognize when they're open, have discernment about which ones to step through, and still kind of take ownership over charting your life, while also collaborating with, your guides or the universe or spirit or whatever you want to call it, that's kind of rolling out the red carpet for you. It's both and.
Right, it is, because we do have free will. I mean, I can choose to go against what they're telling me is in my highest good. I have that choice. It's just not going to be as fulfilling, that's for sure. So yes, co-creating, it is this balance between your free will choice and aligning with what they have in store for you and having faith in that. That's the hard part too.
Yes. I mean, that's faith. Faith is such a... What we're talking about here is really just another way of saying your true north. Like when you're facing north, that's great, but you still have to go in that direction,
Right.
And so like they'll turn your head and point you in the direction, but you got to go, and you kind of have to trust at some point. At some point, it just takes trust that this is the right direction, and I have enough good reasons to believe that this is the direction I need to go, and then you go. And this is like, I left our last recording feeling a little bit weird about the whole love yourself first, do your own thing first before other people. Because I'm still hung up on this idea that some people might listen to this podcast and be like, oh, I only care about myself. Abby and Ryan said I'm on the right track. And then they're just like steamrolling the experiences of everybody that they live with, And then if somebody has a problem with that, pointing the finger and be like, oh, what in you do you have a problem with that you're causing yourself to be triggered by my actions that had nothing to do with you, and I respectfully don't give a shit. Like there are ways that you can use all of the things that we're saying to just not care about anyone in a way that's like not good.
Then you're
like,
not
there's a
really
way to care
listening.
About...
Like if someone is
Right.
doing that, they are not really hearing what we're saying, right? Because that is not at all what we are saying.
But what I'm struggling with is that I've gone back and listened, and I'm thinking to myself, it's like that's the thing about being raised in a religion and then moving away from that religion. Is part of your journey there is understanding that you can take those texts and derive literally any meaning out of them that you want. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, we are powerless to control what other people do with what we say and what they hear from the words that we put out. But then I'm also listening thinking, it's not that hard to use our words to make an argument that you really just are not supposed to give a shit about your spouse, your kids, your roommate, your coworkers, And so I think
you could interpret that way
north,
if you are not.
Well, this is the element that we didn't mention. That I think maybe you and I were kind of operating as though it's an assumption. That maybe I just want to make sure we catch it. It's that prioritizing yourself and showing yourself love and making that the top priority is something that works, quote unquote works, as like builds harmony and wholeness and healing if you are moving in your true north. Because if you're moving in your true north, that is love, that is light, and that is not only in your best good, but everyone's best good. And so when you're moving in your true north and operating according to your highest self, or at least doing the best you can to figure out what that is and doing the best you can to live it out, under those conditions, then the best thing you can do is love yourself first and prioritize yourself and set boundaries and keep them and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not, and you are kind of moving away from growth, holding on to your childhood self, pushing back against things that would invite you to dig in and uproot and rearrange the furniture in your own house into something that's more mature and awake. If you're in that place where you're not interested and you defend against things that would challenge you to grow, then for you to prioritize yourself and to love yourself would almost always be at the expense of other people. And that's not in your highest good because it's not in their highest good. Because it's not your true north.
Exactly.
And so there's like, there's a way to be I don't want to say the word selfish. Like, there's a way to be the center of your own universe that's in everyone's highest good, and there's a way to be the center of your own universe in a way that is no one's highest good. And both of those might look very much the same, because in both cases, you can be very resilient to the critique of other people. But where it comes from makes a difference. And one of them incorporates, hey, I've already chosen to move in the direction of your and my shared highest good. and that's what this looks like, and here's why, and I can defend that. In that case, if you have a problem with it, then those are your own emotional hangups that you need to deal with. But if I haven't chosen to move in all of our greatest good, and I'm literally just looking out for what feels good to me, then when you have a critique, that might be valid. I might actually grow from listening to you sharing your experience of me, and move closer into living in my true north. I think I listened to our recording last week and was remiss that we didn't make that clarification. And I think that's why I kept pushing back on you. Like, what if someone's actually just selfish? Like, what if they're actually just selfish? Did we not just call them out and say, stop being selfish? But I think that's the delineation that I was trying to get to, was there are two different two different opposing energies that it can come from, which have a very huge bearing on whether or not it's the right place for you to be.
Right. I would agree, and I'm glad you made that clarification. And I think what I would say to somebody in that situation, let's say that the person, for example, with me, this is just hypothetical, was that way, like taking our words and manipulating them in a way that would work for them in order to just, like you said, put themselves in first and sort of shit on everybody else in their world. And then there's me that's having to interact with that person, and I'm one of them that's kind of getting walked on a bit. Here's what I would say to that person, to the me of this story, is this is where you have a choice, right? If you're interacting with that person, they're clearly not hearing what we're saying. It is not in their highest good, which makes it not in your highest good. So you can either figure out, what are you meant to learn from that? Is it intended to make you stronger? Is it intended to help teach you figure out how to show up with people who do trigger you, and find out how to meet them where they are, and from their perspective figure out why they're projecting all these things on you? That's a really hard lesson to learn. And sometimes it's best learned when it's that person closest to you, because they're obviously the person that triggers you the most.
Right. And I think we do like gravitate towards people, like you get in the most intimate relationships with people who are the most triggering, because your soul knows that is the best place to learn the actual real lesson.
Right. Yeah. We don't choose the people we choose on accident.
Right.
They are most certainly there to teach us something.
Oh, and then on meeting other people where they are, one of our tribe members, I had a conversation with them this week, and she's been really digging into Richard Rohr's work, because she's also moving away from the religion that she inherited, and so she's in a deconstruction phase, and Richard Rohr has been really good at kind of like tying up those loose ends and making sense of things that stop making sense. And he talks about being self-referential instead of being selfish. And the way that, again, I really wish that I had gone back and like read all of the things so I could say like straight from Richard Rohr's mouth, but this conversation happened a few days ago. I didn't have time. So according to our tribe member, the idea is that when you're self-referential, you see everything that you experience through the lens of your own context. Which sounds normal. That sounds like, oh, well, who doesn't do that, right? And that's the only lens we have.
Right.
So if you say something to me, I'm going to take your words and interpret it through what my parents taught me that means, what my best friend taught me that means, what my whole history, that person who beat me up, all of those things. I'm going to filter it through all of those, and then on whatever happens on the other side of that, that's what I'm going to hear you having said.
Yes.
Hear you having said, whatever. and that seems natural. Like, we've normalized that type of behavior. Like, you wouldn't look at that and say there's not necessarily anything inherently wrong with it, but it's also not the most productive way to relate to another person.
Exactly.
Because when they relate to you, what they're also doing, if you look for it, is giving you a window into their context.
Yes.
And so if you're doing something that is just the way that you were raised, right? That's like the one thing that everybody falls back on when they have no other way to defend their behavior, that they don't know why they do it that way, you know? Well, it's just the way I was raised, or it's what my parents did, or whatever. if someone critiques the way you show up and that's your answer, A, you're already being defensive because you're looking for a thing that you disagree with and just spitting out a defense about why you should just be allowed to continue to do it and the other person should get over it. But then what you're doing is you're saying, this is my context, and that should be enough for you. But what you're missing is that you're not looking at their context.
Right.
Because the fact that they have a problem with that thing comes from their own context. And so you can defend your own actions with your own context and not get anywhere. Or you can be like, okay, well, what you just said to me reveals to me your context. This bothers you because someone else in your life that has nothing to do with me made you feel devalued as a person when they did this thing as well. And so then when you come to me with something that feels like a critique of me, I can choose to see it that way, or I can choose to see it as you revealing to me your context and trying to like adopt that for a little while and living in that context just long enough to try to understand where you're coming from. And not as a way of being in your business, quote unquote, but as a way of meeting you truly where you are.
That is the hysterectomy philosophy right there in a nutshell.
Yes.
It's all that context below the surface that you kind of have to dig for. Like
Yes.
You don't see that it's happened. Yeah.
Yes. And they're not going to tell you.
Right.
They're not going to
No,
tell you, hey,
no.
when I was in 4th grade, I had this experience. It made me feel bad about this part of myself, and you're triggering that by doing this and replaying that thing in my head. That's not how we communicate with each other.
Right.
And so you have to do the work to ask yourself, not what about me is triggering you, but what about you is triggering you right now? And how can I protect that if I care about you? And meet you there and see that. So an example would be like okay, like say that when I was younger, I was a loud chewer. And this is a very like, people get super divided over whether or not people should be loud chewers, and some people are really annoyed and some people aren't, and there's all like a whole word for it. And let's say my parents made me feel like shit for being a loud chewer because it was not polite and wasn't manners to chew loudly at the table. And so I learned how to not. And then I go marry somebody who's very sensitive to me being a loud chewer, or just loud chewers in general.
Interesting.
And so I've been trained not to, but then because you attract people into your life who present you opportunities to outgrow your shit, right? So then I'm a loud chewer, but let's throw another kink in it. Let's say that like my kid is a loud chewer, and it's just like a hereditary thing, right? So then like the person I'm with, it doesn't like the fact that I'm a loud chewer. It doesn't like the fact that my kid is a loud chewer. I can get defensive and say, well, hey, you know, like this hurts me when you critique that because it reminds me of how much it hurt me when my parents critique that. So don't critique it and don't hurt me. And then you say, well, your kid's a loud chewer too, and you need to figure that out. Well, I'm sure as hell not going to tell my kid not to be a loud chewer because of how much it hurt me when my parents told me not to be a loud chewer. And you're and that thinking, like you're only in your own experience. You haven't even thought about why this person is sensitive to loud chewers. What if this person had an abusive presence in their life who was also a loud chewer?
Exactly.
And then you chewing loudly is a trauma trigger for them.
Right.
And it sends their nervous system into fight or flight, and all of a sudden, instead of being safe, you are someone that they feel they need to be protected from. And if you don't ask yourself, what context are you coming from that makes this a problem for you? You're never going to dig into that, and they're never just going to volunteer that. You know? So then it could be like, okay, well, first I can dig into my parents I'm not living in my parents' world anymore. I'm not under their roof. I'm not their kid. So I need to deal with why I feel terrible about being a loud chewer because of them and let go of that and process that. Then if I'm doing life with a person who doesn't want my kid to be a loud chewer, maybe instead of just refusing to do a thing that my parents did to hurt me, I can reframe the way. Maybe it's the way they did it. Maybe there's a way they could have encouraged me to chew quietly without making me feel like shit about it. And maybe it's an invitation for me to figure out how to communicate to my kid, hey, don't chew loudly because some people really have a problem with that, but do it in an updated way, like a version 2.0, where I can still correct the behavior without causing the shame.
Right.
For the sake of the person who it's a really hard time for. But all of those things come from first meeting them where they are by understanding that they're coming from their context instead of defending your actions through your own context. And then second of all, using their critique not as something that to defend against, but as an opportunity. They're pointing out something in you that you haven't processed and dealt with that you probably need to, so that eventually, because you're human, eventually one day you're going to chew loudly again and they're going to say something, and you can receive that feedback without being triggered, without getting defensive, because you've processed the pain associated with that, and you now understand where it comes from in that person, and you can, you have a chance to redo a better way what you feel like your parents did the wrong way, and rewrite the narrative and change the cycle in the next generation, so that then your kid can be like, oh, my dad taught me how to not be a loud chewer, and it didn't make me feel like shit.
Yes, but I disagree with you on one point, and that would be trying to... I think what you need to do is, yes, understand their context so that you can figure out why it's triggering you, learn your lessons so that it does no longer trigger you. But I think in your example of then teaching your son a different way, I think that you are teaching him to still sit in somebody else's business, because you are making him be concerned that someone else thinks he's a loud chewer. Because if you are in your own business and you are a loud chewer and it's bothering somebody else, that is their business. That is their problem, their trigger, their trauma, their context, right? That they're not giving you, that they are projecting on you. So if it affects you, like, because they say something negative, yes, do that work. Exactly what you're saying. I totally agree. But then what I would do differently in your example is I would teach your son how to stay in his business, given that he is also a loud chewer, and how to not be triggered by someone that may say to him at some point in his life that he is. Instead of teaching him to, because what I feel like what you're saying is, in order for me to love you, or in order for me to be in your space, I need you to chew quietly. And I don't think that that's true love. I think that's conditional.
Okay, so what you're saying is don't give conditional love. But I think there's also something to be said for preparing your kid to do life with people who are still stuck in their own hang-ups.
Yes, but then I think that's what we teach them. We teach them that being in your business and sitting in love and light is recognizing that other people, and maybe we figure out how to explain it in exactly what you said, just in their language, where we can say that other people have their own experiences, and when they're interacting with us, they're using those experiences to interpret our interactions, what's happening around us. And so when we are wanting to love someone or be in relationship with someone, we have to find that balance where, yes, I want to stay in my business, and that might mean I'm a loud chewer, but if that bothers you because you are triggered in this way and I still want to have a relationship with you, then it's my business to choose whether or not I'm going to say, nope, I want to be a loud chewer, you're gonna have to get over it, or I love and respect you, that I'm going to honor that and try.
Right. So really, I'm not going to sit down with my kid and say, hey, I need you to chew more quietly because I married someone who has a problem with it for reasons that have nothing to do with either of us. Instead, should be something more along the lines of, understand that other people have other contexts, and here's what you can do to go engage with those and meet people where they are, such that if you find yourself in a position with somebody who A, you love, and B, really hates loud chewing, like you said, then if you do have compassion for them and you care about their experience and you've met them where they are and you understand their context because you've done the work to reach out and find it, then you're equipped with, how do I love this person well? Can I find it within myself to not chew loudly for the sake of them not having a terrible experience over my choices? And so then I'm really just teaching him, hey, care about other people. And if I teach him that, then he doesn't have to necessarily stop chewing loudly all the time.
Yes.
But if he's aware of everybody else at the table, then he can make an informed decision about how to show up as his best self, which, if that includes someone who doesn't like loud chewing, means you probably figure out
He
how to do
tempers
it
that
quietly.
for the
And then,
right,
I'm not
exactly.
shaming him
Yes, right.
for making him feel bad, but then I'm also not setting him up to go into a relationship with someone who hates the loud chewing, and his only tool in his toolbox is to defend his actions because this is what
Yes.
my parents did to me.
Right. So I think we need to just teach them to meet people where they are and what that fully means.
Right, and that's I'm so glad that this tribe member mentioned this because it's such a simple way to do it. It's just to say, hey, and you can recognize that. Like you can recognize that you're being defensive when all you do when they say a bunch of words and you pick out the things you disagree with. You are listening only for things that you can fight, and then the first thing out of your mouth is, but what about this? But what about that? Right? Like you can see that behavior and say, okay, I'm being defensive, and I'm being defensive because this is hitting a trigger that has nothing to do with them. Right? So there are ways that you can look at your behavior as signals that you are in a certain mental, emotional, psychological state. And in the same way, I just forgot where I was going with that. You can tell if you're being self-referential by what comes out of your mouth in response to what comes out of theirs. Even if they're talking about you. If the things that come out of your mouth are you-centric, chances are you've taken their input, you've ingested it, you've digested it, you've processed it through your own context, and you spit it out according to that context. Whereas if someone critiques me for a thing I'm doing and I use that as an opportunity to learn about them because I'm curious about them and their context and what built them into a person that would say those things, then what comes out will most likely be questions about them. Not poking, prodding, why is that a trigger for you? What happened to you that's making you, project this onto me? Like, not that, because that's still defensiveness. But, like, I really want to understand where this comes from. Because I think there's a base note here. And maybe we're talking about something very specific and particular now, but the base note may permeate into something else that we haven't ever really addressed.
All of this that you're saying is exactly how I show up with my mother. Because my mother is very, very triggering for me, and it's easy. And if my guard is down, she can certainly trigger me, and I will immediately get defensive, sad, angry, whatever it is that she's triggered. And so I have used this, like, okay, why am I bothered by this? What she just said or how she behaved. Why am I bothered by this? What is it that's bothering me? So I first look at that piece, and it could be like, okay, I'm tired, my bubble's down, I need to eat, my blood. It could be past trauma too, that I'm like, okay, that's this story. But then what I've started to do with her to help me heal is I can't make her heal herself. She has no interest in healing herself. But because I love her and I want to be a part of her world and I want to have a relationship with her, but I also want to keep myself safe, I have shifted, and I started doing this a long time ago, where I look at her context and I take all the stories that she has willingly told me about her upbringing. I've taken the stories from my grandmother, and I piece together what I can with what she's willing to share, and it has amazingly diffused so many experiences with her where I could have easily gotten defensive and triggered, but instead I'm like, oh, I know why she's doing that, because grandma used to do XYZ or didn't do this, or, it's a lot easier for me when I sit in her context, like you said, to diffuse me, right? So I first ask myself why it's bothering me, but then I kind of figure out from her history and her past without projecting that she needs to get help or do this or just getting angry all the time and not having a relationship with her, how to work around it, essentially, so that we can still be connected.
And that just comes from respecting yourself.
Absolutely.
Enough to understand that you don't have to be sucked into the thing.
Right.
You're your own person with your own situation, and she's her own person, and you're only as dependent on her for your emotional well-being as you allow yourself to be. And the more you respect yourself, the less you look to other people to manage your emotions.
Right. And, we talked before that it's not always about just cutting that person out of your life. Like, I don't want to cut my mother out of my life, but is she going to change? No. She's not. And so this is the way that I can have a relationship with her exactly as she is, and it be a good one. right? One that we can continue to grow. Would I like for her to grow? And yes, I think she would be a lot happier. But that's not my business, and I can't sit in that. And if I rely on her externally for validation for my feelings and have my needs met, this will be a losing relationship. It will be miserable.
Yeah. Do you think does she treat you badly, like objectively speaking? Because it sounds like you've gotten to a place with her where no matter what she does, there's no moral, there's no assignment of a moral alignment to any of her actions. This is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not right or wrong. It's just a result of her context, and I can choose to let that bother me or not.
Right.
But would you say that she actually objectively treats you badly, or is it just that she demonstrates lack of growth?
She does not treat me badly. I do need to put that out there. I mean, she's very good to me. Very kind.
So
there's just things that
go ahead.
There's just things that do, like, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, so and this is partly my sister's experience, so I'm not going to share a lot about this, but it sort of explains what I'm talking about. We're all doing this big family camping trip at the end of September, and initially my sister and her family were not invited on this trip. No rhyme or reason why. It's just I usually come up to Nebraska for a week in the summer, and because of the Rona, we didn't get to make it up, and so in order to kind of see them, we decided to do this halfway camping trip. And this my sister, that kind of hurt her feelings that she didn't get invited on this trip. I can say that because she shared that with me, and I know she won't mind that I share it for this example. So things like that happen to me a lot as well, where just like she's not, and if I look at it, like my mother is not intentionally leaving my sister out, but because of our experiences with how we were treated, like being raised, we were left out. So that's how I would read it. That's how she reads it. And so there's not a matter of like my mom being mean or unkind in any way. It's just there's certain behaviors and things that she says that trigger the bad times growing up that if we don't protect ourselves, then they can easily hurt us. So if
she did actually treat you badly, would your attitude change about how you respond to her and how she shows up?
It probably would. It would. Like if she treated me badly, I would probably have to choose at that point to cut that relationship. That is a time where I would say I'm severing this relationship, because right now it still is in my highest good to have a relationship with her. And she's developing a fantastic relationship with my son, which is exactly what I wanted. But if any of that changes, then yes, that's where I would have to say, nope.
That's where you draw the line.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't come from like I have standards for you as a human being, but it's more like I respect myself enough to not let myself be treated that way.
Right.
So like if you're in a marriage with somebody, I keep bringing it back to marriage because that's just where most of the people in my life who come to me with stuff, it's always marital stuff. But let's say that your spouse doesn't like you described your mom, hasn't grown, isn't growing, and doesn't show any signs that they're interested in growing or healing. Healing is the word you said. And they just are going to be how they're going to be. And let's say you've been married for a while and you're still having the exact same issues that you had when you got married, or maybe they're even worse. And you can't figure out what to do to affect any kind of change, but you don't want to just like let it happen, because then you're basically just condoning it at that point. Like you have to stand up for yourself. Right. It's one thing to be like, well, I'm only triggered because of my context, and I should try to see my spouse through their context, and that may give me insight into why they're being that way, and then we can help them heal. And that may be a way that you can do. That may be a route that you can take if you have the wherewithal to withstand how they treat you. But if they genuinely are treating you badly as a result of their lack of growth or intent to grow, and then when you call them out on it, let's say worst case scenario, they don't listen, they defend it, or they make excuses, or they, even worse, say they'll change and then don't. What do you say to that person? Do we just tell them, hey, figure out why you're triggered and do that work until they're not triggering anymore when they treat you badly? Or does it go back all the way to what you said a few episodes ago, where you just have to decide whether or not you're going to stay in a relationship with that person?
You do. That's it. Because I mean, what I'm saying is this is not an excuse to be physically or emotionally abused. Like I'm not just
Right.
like, okay, I'm gonna, meet you where you are and figure out like why you're projecting this on me, why it's triggering you, and just be okay with that. I am not saying that this gives anybody permission or an excuse to be abused, right? Or treated very poorly. Like that's the point where that isn't in your highest good either. And to keep the other person, the abuser, in their highest good would be for you to leave that situation, because then maybe that would allow them to get help. Maybe that would allow them to learn a lesson they need to learn in order to stop doing it. We don't know, but that's not our business to figure out.
So you ready for me to tie this whole thing in a big old knot?
Yes.
Not a bow, a knot.
Bring it on. I like
what
knots.
What if someone's in that situation? But yet, like we referenced earlier in this podcast, they have very good reason to believe that this is the chapter they're supposed to be in until they and or their spouse learn the lessons they're supposed to learn. And so it's one of those things where like you're right where you need to be. And you know that there are certain growth / healing moments that are going to need to happen before you're even ready to go to the next chapter. Whether that means building a new relationship with this person or cutting it off. But in the meantime, they're still not healing. They're still not showing intention of moving that direction. And they're still mistreating you. But you are solid. Like you have, like God himself or herself, let's say herself, God herself came and said, you are where you need to be because you both have lessons to learn from each other during this time.
What do you say?
What do they do?
That's what you're asking.
What do they do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it only takes one time to learn that lesson. I think an emotional trauma and a physical trauma is so deep and physiologically and psychologically altering that I would question if they feel that that's the lesson they need to learn more than one incident. I would really want to sit with that person and find out what it is they think they still need to learn. Because I don't, if they're like, okay, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, this is just a lesson I'm learning right now, all the while someone is abusing them in some way, I'm not convinced that's the right situation. I think everything you needed to learn happened in one incident, and now you need to get the hell out. That's my opinion. I don't think that, I'm a proponent of, you are somewhere for a reason.
Right.
But I cannot, in good conscience, say it is in your highest good to stay in that relationship because you're in the middle of learning a lesson. Having been abused, if someone said that to me, it would just crush me.
That is a hard choice. I feel like a lot of people are gonna like at some point people are gonna be like, I'm getting a divorce because Abby and Ryan told me to. Like
yes,
we're not big, huge, giant divorce fans. We're just fans of you loving yourself.
Yes.
And understanding that we couple with other souls to learn and grow in ways that those souls are specifically and uniquely qualified to help us do that.
Right.
And maybe you're supposed to be like, if you're in a relationship that sucks, that relationship needs to end. But that doesn't mean you need to cut it off with that person. It just means you might need to build a new one in its place.
Right.
Or cut it off.
Right. Well,
And
that's
so
why I use
it's
the example of my mother. Like, I had to change the way that I showed up with her because I didn't want to cut
Right.
the relationship. So I changed what did you say? episode or two ago.
I said a lot of things.
You needed to change the environment of the relationship.
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to change the our shared environment.
Yeah. So I changed the shared environment because I knew that she wouldn't, and I was still okay with the terms of what she was bringing to this shared environment. And so all I had to do was manage my own business, and now we can have a loving relationship. But that's because she isn't abusing me. Right? So yes,
right.
I agree with you. We are not saying like cut that person
out.
If
you're unhappy with them, get rid of it. Yeah, no.
It truly is, yes, love and honor yourself, respect yourself, change that environment with what's within your business, and a lot of times you can see growth within that, and it works and it's manageable, and you can still learn that lesson and not have to cut that relationship, and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
And that's when you just have to let go of attachment.
Yes, like my phrase of the week is it's okay to not. Mm-hmm. My wife is she was in 2 master's classes at the same time. I say that like it's a lot. Like, I mean, it is a lot. It's master's classes.
That's
and they were like
amazing.
4 weeks long, so they were so it's 2 at the same time, more than I could do, right? And she was coming down to where she was doing her finals on both of them, and she was very overwhelmed. Like she was just in her office, sun up to sundown, stressed about getting all the work done and everything, and having it be good quality and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, well, which class are you more ahead in, grade-wise? And she said, okay, this one. And I said, what is your grade in it right now? And she told me, and I said, what would your grade be if you failed the final? Like if you got a 0? And she looked back at the syllabus and she crunched some numbers and she said it would be this. And I was like, okay, that's a solid A-. So it's okay to not do that final. Like you can just not. Right. And she's like, no, it's the final. I can't just not do the final. I was like, yeah, you can, because not doing the final means you get to spend time with your son and you still pass.
Right.
And she's like, oh, but GPA. And I was like, no one gives a fuck about GPA once you graduate.
No kidding.
No one's going to ask you. When you have a master's degree, people aren't like, oh, what was your GPA?
And you're still getting an A.
I have other master's degree candidates. Right. So, like, it is okay to not. And it never occurred to her that she could just tell the prof, I am, as of now, done doing work on your class. I know that there's time left and there's assignment, and I'm going to take the 0. I'm not going to do any more. I've done everything I need to do to get what I need out of this class, and I'm just going to not. Like, it didn't occur to her that she could just not take the final, but I was like, it's okay to not. And then I had 2 or 3 more conversations. Like, I have another friend who had an opportunity to meet his bio dad several decades into his life, but he's doing a thing, and he anticipated that would have a lot of emotional upheaval that would happen and kind of like knock him off kilter, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. And I told him, like, it's okay to not. Like, you don't have to go meet your bio dad. No one, like, maybe some people do expect it. You don't owe it to anybody to do that. It is okay to not, if you'd rather prioritize the thing that you're building that you don't want to get knocked off kilter for.
Absolutely.
And it didn't occur to him because that's the narrative. You never met your bio parent, and then you have a chance to meet your bio parent. You go fucking meet your bio parent. I was like, no, you don't have to. Like,
that's
is one
somebody
script
else's.
That you can follow that script, but you don't. It's okay to not, right? And so even when it comes to relationships, if you actually are in a spot where you feel like it's run its course and it's over, but you have all these reasons for why you're sticking around, ask yourself if those reasons are tied to your true north. And if they're not, if there's someone else's reason, if it's stay together for the kids or because of financial reasons or whatever, it's okay to not continue this relationship, and you will figure out how to land on your feet.
Right.
But again, it has to be aligned with your true north, your true self, which means you have to at least be pursuing figuring out what that is if you don't already know.
Right.
And once you do know, it takes courage to move in that direction, because I almost guarantee it's not what people are going to want you to do.
Right, exactly.
until you do it, and then they find out it's what the world's been needing. But that's this weird resistance you bump into when you start moving that direction. Is you get people just are like, I don't understand why you're doing this. What's going on? Well, I don't understand. And you do it anyway.
Yes, and when you do it anyway, and you are aligned with your true self, people are going to see a whole new version of you. Like this week, being in the mountains, sleeping in a tent, dirty feet every day, I have smiled more than I've smiled in a long time. And my sister noticed. Like, it's noticeable when you align with your true north, because it's like you are expressing this light of your highest essential self.
Yep.
That is,
and that shows.
and it shows. It, like, your energy, just people want to be around you because it shows. Yeah, and so they may question at first until you actually start showing up as your true self, your true north, and they're going to be like, whoa, I get it now.
Right, you're returning to who you were before the world told you who you could and couldn't, should and shouldn't be.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So I want to have this conversation, either with our tribe or on the podcast, but kind of who you were as a kid before exactly what you said, before you were told not to be that or couldn't be or
and
shouldn't be.
And how old were you when you started realizing you had to cater how you express yourself to make other people more comfortable with how you are?
Yes.
I imagine it's like the first... My hypothesis, I'm just going to throw it out there, is that I don't know that very many people probably made it past 3 or 4 before realizing that somebody had an expectation of them that was based on that somebody and not them. And they just was like, okay, I have to conform to this now. This is what I have to do.
Yeah, and it's certainly by 5 when you start going to school, right? Then you have all these things you can or should and should not do and how you should behave. And yeah, so you're right. It probably all happens before 5.
Oh, good, because I definitely did not have a topic lined up for this coming call, and now I do. Because that's gold. And also, like, a lot of people have been asking, like, how do you start figuring out your true north? Well, that's what it is. What your true north self is who you were before anybody else told you what else you should be.
And that's exactly where I was going with this. Yes.
Yes, you have to peel off those layers. And that was one of the homework I gave everybody, was take one limiting belief that you find yourself catch yourself telling yourself, and then ask yourself, who said that? Mm-hmm. And when people really, really dig into where that came from, it is never themselves. It's their mom, their dad, their siblings, their teachers, whatever. Yeah. It's never them. And so then you peel it off. You're like, okay, that's not mine. That was given to me, and I carried it around, and it's not mine, and I'm dropping it. I'm dropping the dead weight. And you do that to all of the limiting beliefs, all of the different molds you think you should fit into, all the different things that you were told you needed to be or couldn't be or shouldn't be. Figure out where they came from, and then let them go. Yes. And then what is left is you. Mm-hmm. Even though when you do that, it's scary, because I'm still going through that process, but I've been doing it for a while, and it's scary because when all those things are gone at first, it doesn't seem like there's a me left. Like it was coming up null, like there was nothing there. And I was like, oh well, shit, there's got to be something there. Yeah. And so then you start digging in, and then that's when the magic happens. Yep. And then that's all right. Sometimes when you run a podcast, you switch the software you use to record because you get a better idea about how to do it, and then you need to relearn that software, and sometimes the relearning process involves accidentally having the thing just stop recording in the middle of your episode. So that's what happened. I don't remember what we said, but I'm just going to pick it up at the part where I asked Abby what she's grateful for. You know what I'm grateful for? This lesson about how not to use this new software.
Oh, man. What am I grateful for? I'm actually grateful for myself today. Yeah, I don't say that. I don't say that often, and when I'm sharing gratitudes with people, that's usually the last thing I think to share, because again, going back to, I don't want them to think I'm selfish. I really needed this trip, and I really want to cultivate in my son how to find his true north, and the best way that I can do that is through modeling, and I can do that here. Like, this is where I can do that best. And so he has seen me in my highest good because I was willing to show up and do it and say yes. And then just because I have been taking better care of myself, and it's making a difference. And I just, I'm grateful that I want to take care of me. So there you go.
Well, I learned something about this recording software today that I will fix next time. But we lost a good maybe 10 or 20 minutes of my stuff. But regardless, I'll make it work. So my gratitude, starting over, rewind. I'm very grateful for a lot of friends, and I'm just going through them one at a time on all these weekly gratitudes. So last week I was grateful for somebody who kicked my ass into gear with clearing off my plate. getting a lot of things off my to-do list so that I can actually have time and energy to do the things that I want to do and feel called to do. And one of those things was cleaning out my office, which had never been done. Like, we moved in November of last year. It's August now, and the office is just clean for the first time. I mean, like, things are put in their place. Everything's organized. There's space. There's nothing on the floor.
Nice, yeah.
And part of the process was getting rid of some art, or just getting rid of a bunch of junk. But one of the things I came across was art, and I have saved almost every little piece of art I made as a kid. Something happened, because I said in the retreat, when I make an art, I immediately destroy it. Because I don't need, it's just stuff at that point. It's baggage, it's junk, it's taking up space, and I don't need it, because to me the act of making it is the art, not having it. But everything before that switch was turned, I saved. So I have stuff from when I was in first grade. I have stuff from when I have stuff that Rayron made.
Oh.
And even into my marriage. Like, I have some stuff that I know that I was married when I made. So we're talking early 20s, at least. And then, of course, being who I am now, I saw that stuff. I looked through it. I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm going to throw it all away. So I started to. But before I did that, I sent this all to another friend. I just sent like a slew of images on Snapchat. Like, it was like 37 snaps all in a row, just to one person. Like, look at all this stuff I drew when I was little. And he was like, what are you going to do with it? I was like, well, I'm going to throw it away. I don't have any space for it. I don't have anything to like, they serve no purpose, and they're just taking up space. I'm going to get rid of them. And he was like, oh, you send those to me. I will save them. And I was like, what? He was like, this is like, it's... We talked a little bit about taking a picture of it, like keeping a digital format, but I realized, like, I did that with my first grade journal when my cat peed on it, and I took a bunch of pictures so I could save the pages, and it's just not the same as having the actual thing.
Right, yeah.
Like, that's the only one of that. And then you can feel it in your hands, and I can touch the paper fibers with my fingers that are the same paper fibers that were drawn on by another version of me. And so this friend was like, you save those or I will save them, but they're going to get saved, goddammit. And so I'm saving them, and they're all there, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm certainly not going to frame them, but I think it'd be cool for, my kid to see them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now, having decided to save them, I am now grateful for that friend who kind of freaked out at the idea of me just throwing them away. They're not good. They're just drawings.
It doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter. That's not why you save it.
It's like insight into another version of yourself.
Yeah, and then of course, once I decided that they were sticking around, I went through them again with a new eye. That's like, okay, I'm going to look at these and really go back into and I had a whole like anime phase, and one part where I was just making spaceships, and so you can move through these chronologically and see like where I was as a person in my development and what I was focusing on and what I cared about, and that's kind of cool.
I think that says a lot. I'm really grateful for that friend too. Now you need to start doing that with your journals as well as your art.
No,
quit throwing that shit away.
I am a minimalist at heart who creates a bunch of stuff. Do you realize how much tension there is there?
I will throw away everything in my world except the 4 big boxes of journals that I've had since I could write. Yes.
Jeez Louises.
Yes.
Abby.
My sister has strict instructions, though, to burn them if something happens to me. I think that's in the will.
That's the whole, like, you need your one trusted friend to delete your search history if you die unexpectedly.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
I had another tribe member also say, hey, stop getting rid of your journals when you finish them. Like, it was very much like, here's a reason why this is a terrible idea and you should stop immediately.
Right.
So I have been convinced that there are some things that I make that are worth keeping once they're done being made.
Yeah.
Did you hear the eye roll when I said that, though? It goes against a lot of who I am as a person. So
we'll get there. It's practice.
All right, well, it is. Life is practice. We should talk about that next time. It's on our little notes thingy.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, have fun being in the mountains. Make sure to find me that tree that's been hit by
I will
lightning.
look for you. I'm excited.
And until next time, thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Yeah, bye.